Is there a drug problem in Dubois County? Well, let's find out in this edition of WJTS in.form. I'm your host, Bill Potter. Joining me in the studio is the Dubois County Sheriff, Donny Lampert. And obviously his department deals a lot with drug abuse. And we appreciate you coming in to talk to us about drugs. Now, you know, a lot of people, sometimes we live sheltered lives. And if we're not doing drugs ourselves, we assume, okay, other people aren't doing drugs. So there must not be a drug problem in Dubois County. But there is. And you had mentioned off the air that the drug problem in Dubois County is similar but different than other areas.
A lot of areas have their own little feel or little deal going on with drugs, and some of it, there's like sometimes it goes in waves. So you might have something hit in California, and it may not hit here 2 years later, and then it hits us. And one of the things this morning I did was, and I looked at who's in jail, what they're in jail for. I talked to our narcotics officer and different things, and what we've came up with is that the most abused drug, which seems to be consistent, I think it's a drug we forget, is prescription drugs. I think it's become where people look at, okay, it's helping me, therefore it can help somebody else. You don't know that person's chemical makeup, you don't know what all they're taking, and even if you do, that's why they're called prescription drugs. Mm-hmm. So that is something that's interesting. They're also easy to get, they're also easier to steal. A lot of this doesn't fall back, and I know they're putting a lot of pressure on doctors. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Where we shouldn't start pointing fingers at certain agencies that they're the fault, they're the cause. Each individual needs to look at themselves. I think sometimes we get lax when we hear, well, the doctor prescribed it, so it must be okay. And I've seen a lot of celebrities where you've had, deaths because of prescription drugs. That's where we as a society need to understand. We as an individual need to understand what prescription drugs we are getting, what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, and be honest with our doctors. It's an epidemic across the United States, even in other countries. The number of people seeking treatment help for opioid, which right now the biggest ones are the opioids, the tranquilizers, sedatives, and stimulants. But it grew more than 400% in the decade ending in 2008.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's something very serious, prescription medicine. And I think it's something we associate with being safe, but not necessarily safe. So that's something we need to be aware of. And I think the other thing is that you'll see somebody, hey, look, I have this pain pill, go ahead and take it, and they'll take one, and then there's like no really big deal. But that can always be the start of that addiction.
Right.
The biggest drug we've seen too, as far as called a comeback drug, is the cocaine. And cocaine is snorted, injected, smoked. The long-term use has some very high nasty effects. Some of the effects can be increased blood pressure, body temperature, heart rate, cause irritability, depression, mania, anxiety. And I think sometimes when people get caught up in the cocaine, they see other people that they know and trust using the drug. They get this euphoric feeling, hey, look, I have no more stress. It takes that away, and I think a lot of this is what we're doing is we're trying to make our lives better with a quick fix. Mm-hmm. And we've become a society of quick fix, so it makes sense that our drugs are worse than what they used to be. But what it does to the person physically alone, we could be looking at seizures, things like that. So it goes back to we as an individual need to look at our lives and how do we want to live. Just because somebody else is using a drug doesn't mean we're going to look like that. Or we're not going to, and a lot of people using drugs, they point blank lie a lot. Mm-hmm. Because they're doing something a lot of times they feel they shouldn't be doing, but they're lying to themselves where it's okay, and therefore they lie about it. You can get all kind of issues there, dilated pupils, nosebleeds, anxiety attacks, depression, insomnia, irritability, and we want to live a good, healthy life and be happy, and yet these side effects come with it, and yet we use it to try to get that feeling. Under the U.S. Controlled Substance Act 1970, cocaine is a Schedule II drug, and one of the things that they've done is tried to make the drugs more severe. However, it's interesting because recently it seems like our laws have shifted to where we're more lenient because of drugs, because of, I think there's a feeling of we feel sorry for them. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what they're looking for. We talk about needle exchanges. That's what the drug addict is looking for. I need another reason why it's okay for me to use. And we had actually talked to some inmates. They're the ones doing it. They're living it. They're the experts, as far as I'm concerned. The guy said, absolutely want to see a needle exchange. Okay, why? Because, they're thinking, medically we're thinking we're going to save them from getting AIDS, hepatitis, and those kind of diseases. He point blank said, it doesn't matter if me and you are sharing a needle and I know you got AIDS or something like that, I'm going to use it anyways, he said, because what happens is that drug is so powerful, you want that high, you want that euphoric feeling, and that's where we need to get them to mental health, etc. But he said the biggest thing is because then he gets a sharp needle. So the drug or the needles and things like that for their health really stop and think. If we're basing it off of their health, they're taking the drugs that are deteriorating their health, so obviously they really don't care.
Right.
And that's
they'll do what it takes to get it. Yeah.
And we need to keep reassuring people, get off of it. Things are going to work better. Get to mental health. One of the other things that has popped up is heroin. Interesting thing about heroin is there was a big influx recently, things like that. But it's another drug that we are now dealing with. Heroin is one of the most destructive, physically addictive drugs. When people come, and we've had people in jail before where we've had to send them up to the ER, which in turn goes through ICU because the withdrawals are so violent for these people. And you have to stop and think, okay, if that drug's going to have a violent, when I come off of them, what is it doing when it's in my system? And so many times I think people involved in drugs don't think of that. They think about that quick fix or that quick high. But the detoxification in heroin alone can be deadly. If you're going to get off heroin, go get medical treatment is what I advise on that one.
Well, cocaine, heroin, legend drugs, are they really making that big a comeback now? I haven't heard of heroin for years until recently, about, I guess the last 5 years. Now you start hearing about heroin coming back.
Well, and you think about in history, we hit the drug that is the most popular for people using. So we will always be adjusting that.
Okay.
Today it'd be heroin, so now we got all this information out. Why don't you do heroin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now everybody goes, okay, that stuff's bad. I'm shifting to this because it doesn't do this. So what we need to do is look at why are people using, then we need to explain to people, and I think sometimes we forget, drugs a lot of times isn't because of stranger danger, it's because of people we know and they take care of us, for as kids, and we see our parents do it, or we see an older brother or sister use it. Well, what's the big deal? They got a job, they're doing it, I don't see their teeth rotting out and things like that. But then if you look at pictures of people who have used it over a period of time, they completely change. Completely change. The whole body, the physical body, it attacks.
It's really scary. Yeah.
On the interesting one we've had is methamphetamine, and that one kind of goes up and down, but what is really interesting, it seems like what we're coming across now is that people in their 40s are using it for the first time. That's confusing because of the education and life they've lived. Why are people at that age using that drug? Methamphetamine, absolutely. Your teeth can rot out. Now, there's people that I know that their teeth never did, okay? But it's deteriorating another part of their body. They do not sleep for long periods, lose their appetite, lose large amounts of weight, and I think that may be the key thing is because at 40s, we're getting older, our bodies are settling in. We kind of get in that midlife crisis to where it's like, okay, it's not as fun as it used to be. So maybe we used alcohol, maybe we used marijuana, or maybe we didn't use any of them, but now we're out with friends and people we trust, and they're saying, hey, this will make you feel good and happy. So we need to look at the mental part and why we do stuff a lot. It gives you a fast rush of euphoria, and that's what people are looking for. 40 years old, you've kind of been there, done that, and a lot of times it just ain't the same. If you are using alcohol, you have to drink more alcohol, but you never really get that buzz. And that was the interesting thing about the people that I've talked to with meth, is that once you try meth, you're hooked because you're always trying to get that feeling of euphoria. And they told me, they said it's the greatest feeling they ever had. But they said you can never get that first high. It's kind of like winning your first championship in a ball game. You know, that first one's always that special. Hunters talk about the first animal they've ever harvested, and it's that bigger high. Well, with meth, that's kind of what it does, and that's how it hits the brain.
And you'll never be able to achieve it again. So
No,
okay.
and that's okay, because now it's time to experience other achievements. This is not an achievement. But it can cause irregular heartbeat, rapid heartbeat, mood disturbances, violence, aggressive, paranoid behavior, confusion, insomnia. It can, and eventually it probably will basically just deteriorate their body. And that's where a lot of times you start seeing teeth and things like that are gone. One of the reasons the teeth are gone is because there's a caustic nature of the chemicals that there's that chemical and there's that drying of the mouth, and in turn, that's why a lot of times the teeth become the way they do. In this one here, one of the things that probably is good to point out is that this drug becomes the most important thing. You have to have it. So you will literally leave your kids, your spouse, your family, your friends, because you have to have that high. It becomes that powerful. And think about it. Like that lady said, if it's one of the greatest feelings she's ever felt, well, we want to feel that way. But when you look at the long-term effects, it actually destroys you because you're hunting for something you're not going to get. And the worst thing to do is take that first hit of it.
It's a downhill slide from the top.
In this one here, too, with the meth, a lot of your addicts will lie more because they will push away, and it seems sometimes that it's harder to get them to go to rehab. It seems like they're kind of like they're content with their own little world, but that's because the drug's so powerful and so, and actually it's easy to get too, compared to a lot of the others. One of the other ones I'd like to cover is what's called the forgotten drug. The forgotten drug is alcohol. We've been hearing so much in the media about, and not just the media, but in everyday life about marijuana and how there's so many arguments for and against and things. But we forget about alcohol, and that's one of the things locally. Somebody had said the other day that I think Dubois County Maya went up on a scale on alcohol consumption. And it amazes me how many people are proud of that. And then there's other people that aren't proud of that. But a lot of times drinking is acceptable. I mean, it is point blank. It's acceptable to be drunk. You know, as long as you don't go past this. Well, each person reacts with alcohol different than the others. So one person might be a little more violent, another person might be more mellow. And that's where it goes back to with all these drugs. You as an individual, take a look at your life. How do you want to live? You can listen to what other people say about alcohol or the other drugs, but really dig into it and understand it. Alcohol abuse a lot of times is overlooked more than any of the others because it is legal and it has become an acceptable drug. Interesting thing, consumption interferes with work. A person will drink despite knowing he or she will be driving. So there's some mental stuff that goes with that, and we don't usually partake that with alcohol. Memory losses, blackouts. I personally know a guy who drank, was popular in high school, one of the nicest guys you ever met. People thought it was funny, thought it was cool, and he ended up suffering from the blackouts and memory losses. So it's going to happen, can happen. Accidents and injury, look how many accidents we have, and it's something that's kind of pushed off the beaten trail, but really stop and think about the accidents. The other thing, how many times I've been to a house where somebody's been drinking, they've had a domestic, nobody gets arrested. So that's not for alcohol anyways. So that's not listed as an alcohol charge. So we kind of forget about that. The funny thing is that you really stop and think, if you're drinking alcohol and your child needs help with their homework, who's going to help them? And that's what we see a lot of times is that when there's somebody that's an alcoholic or an addict, not only do they suffer, but it's amazing how the family suffers. And this family a lot of times suffers a lot more than anybody else.
Like you might just have to hold. You might just have to hold your mic. How's that?
That'll work. So let's not forget about the alcohol. The K2 spice, 18 to 23-year-olds. Our children who are going to be our leaders someday are using this K2 spice. It's a chemical. It's bad news. So many of them think they hear that it's called synthetic marijuana. Well, we hear so much is that marijuana's not that big a deal. Okay, so think about it. 18, 23-year-old, they're influenced a lot of different ways. Here's what it can cause. Increased agitation, pale skin, seizures, vomiting, profuse sweating, uncontrolled heart rate, palpitations. The onset of this drug happens within around 3 to 5 minutes, so it's a quick-acting drug. The duration can last from 1 to 8 hours. Even beyond the physical, and I don't even know how to pronounce this one word, but severe paranoia, delusions, hallucinations, that's what we're seeing. And that's a scary thing because when you start talking about hallucinations and things like that, we've had a guy one time who was using, our understanding he was using this stuff, still in his house, swore to somebody was breaking in his house. He was staying on top of his house with a gun because he really believed somebody was breaking in his house. You know, stop and think here. We've got enough issues in the community that we don't need that kind of extra stuff. But it's sad because of something where they can change the drug so much to where you have to watch your legislature to keep up with your drug. And that's frustrating because of somebody would even do that. That reminds me back of, you know, we go back to the World Wars where they were testing people as they were guinea pigs, and that's just wrong. The other one I want to talk about, and I call this, I think it's the confusing drug, because so many people think it's okay, and that's marijuana. I'm looking at it from what the medical people are telling me. I'm looking at it from what people who use tell me. I'm looking at it from when I go to a house and there's marijuana use there. A lot of times the kids are sicker. They have allergy problems, asthma problems. Okay, so if it's so wonderful, why is it causing that? In the U.S., it's about 4.5 million people, and more than 860,000 of these Americans are students in middle school or high school that are using marijuana. 860,000. So, you know, we as adults aren't setting a good example, I don't think. But you'll find it in small bags, brownish green leaves, small chunks of a powdery substance. Things to watch for is paraphernalia on the person, bloodshot eyes, fast heart rate. Now, we know when we start messing with the heart, that's not a good thing. Sleepy, lethargic, lack of coordination, increase of cravings for snacks is one of the things they had. And it's funny because that's a symptom that we need to watch for, yet you see in movies and you hear people laugh about it. And sometimes I think we laugh about stuff that we really don't realize how much effect that does to the younger generation. But I think that's kind of, it gives us an idea where Dubois County is at.
And all of these drugs are being seen, I guess, on a regular basis in Dubois County.
Yes.
And there is plenty of help out there if folks need help. There's plenty of organizations that can help you. And if you're not sure, contact the Sheriff's Department and you can get them in touch with help if they need it, or if you know of someone who needs help.
Yes, absolutely. And we keep a list. The other thing is, you have Memorial Hospital, you have Southern Hills. Even if you don't want to go locally, and I've seen people before say, well, I don't want people to know. You can go to up Terre Haute. There's a place up there. You can go, there's teen challenges throughout the area. The key thing is what I've seen, if you're addicted, do a long-term session. Because once you're detoxed and you get back in the same routine you were in, there's a good chance you're going to relapse. Get the long-term help so that when you come back, you don't get a relapse.
Well, Sheriff, thank you very much for coming in. Now, there's a lot we touched, and there's a whole lot more we can talk about. The Sheriff will come back another time and talk about that. But I think the most important thing is, first of all, be aware.
Be aware.
When people, you know, there's heroin in our community. Yes, there's heroin in our community. So be aware that it's there and do what you can to stop it or help those who have problems with it.
And that's simply just standing up and saying you're against it.
Yep.
Very powerful.
Thank you very much. Our guest has been Sheriff Donny Lampert with the Dubois County Sheriff's Department. Thank you for watching WJTS in.form. We're local people watching local people.